Welcome to the Scrumming Certified Scrum Master class. Now this class has something extra special that some of the folks may have already picked up on. There's still half the people in the room, right about half, are Scrum coaches and trainers, top tier. They've taken this class before. In fact, they've probably helped teach or taught this class many times. So why are they in it? They're each offered the opportunity to teach a section of this class. So we just finished what's called a Train the Trainer course, where we worked together on the best we're learning about Scrum applied to all types of work: petrochemicals, aerospace, car manufacture, mergers and acquisitions, banking, and then silos in traditional companies like HR or finance, Scrum in all those domains. So we've had a summit, essentially, of folks internationally. So you hopefully have at least one accent to you from your perspective at your table. This should be the most over-facilitated Certified Scrum Master class ever. It should be, yeah, it sure should be. Now that said, the goal of this class isn't for the coaches and trainers to get more experience. That's a side benefit. And maybe I shouldn't even say more experience. Some are so heavily experienced this class won't make much a dent in their resume. But for them to co-train and coach with the other savvy people in the room, which would be their benefit. It's for the new people in the room to become as excellent as possible in 2 days at rigorous, aggressive Scrum. That's the primary goal. So the trainers and coaches will attempt to make themselves invisible, as will I, except when we're leading a section, and we'll simply try to make the experience the best possible for the newest people in the room. So we'll answer questions, but when asked, we'll let the new folks do the thinking, right? And we'll play along with exercises as if we were new, but we'll answer questions when asked, that type of thing. Now with that, coaches and trainers in the room, which is about half of you, you have the option, if you would like, to receive a co-training credit from Scrum Inc., saying that you've co-taught a class with us, but only if you put your name on one of these sections. I'll give you 2 minutes to see if you still want to take a section, because most of you haven't. You're warmly invited, and I'll tell you that I'll stand up next to you or sit very close to you while you give this section, because as you coaches and trainers in the room know, it's almost impossible to present a section from someone else's materials, which is what I'm asking you to do. So I'll be here to help you. But I'll invite you. Okay, well, on breaks, we'll see if more emerges.
Bravo!
Oh, yay! Please feel free to add as we begin, and you're invited. Folks, yes, ma'am. I don't know. I should ask. I've been prompted. Has everyone signed in? If you haven't, please hand it to the next table. I'm Joe Justice. I'm the president of Scrum in Hardware at Scrum Incorporated. I am lucky enough to work directly with Dr. Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum. I own an all-Scrum automotive manufacturing business that has tiny operations, but very globally, in 23 countries. I am the author of the Extreme Manufacturing Methods. Their advantage is they are a set of 6 technical practices that allow Scrum to be run in manufacturing domains. And now it's being used across all domains, many having nothing to do with hardware. However, the name Extreme Manufacturing seems to have stuck. But it's being used in research and development teams, finance teams, HR, etc. I'm lucky enough to be supported today with the slides, with the content for the entire Scrum Inc. team. The slides we'll be presenting come from Dr. Jeff Sutherland, some from myself, and the other 14 members that make up Scrum Incorporated. Right now, on today's date, there are 3 classes of this type happening around the world. One in Europe, one in Boston, one here. Paul Tacken from the Netherlands, he'll introduce himself in more detail later, but yes, Paul, if you could wave his hand. Yes, thank you so much, Paul. Has flown in from the Netherlands as a Scrum and hardware coach and what is called an extreme manufacturing black belt to help us run the build parties that are happening as part of this class and facilitate the class. We're also joined by Christian Anton, who bases, yes, thank you, Christian, who bases himself in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and essentially, he doesn't travel very often. He attempts to deliver in depth to every company in that geography, unlike myself, who I travel most of the time. So a different model. He also has been doing extreme manufacturing for more than a year, and he was certified by the Scrum Inc. Train the Trainer course this time last year. He'll have a chance to introduce himself more, I hope, a little later in the course. I hope one of you is certified this time next year as a Scrum Inc. certified trainer and coach. That means I hope I get to go teach some of these classes with you, maybe in your company or maybe in another company or maybe a public class like this. So please think if that's something that resonates with you, if this agile stuff really fits you, and if so, please follow the Scrum Alliance guidelines for applying to be a trainer and a coach. Now you know a little bit about me and a little bit about the folks that are helping me directly facilitate this class. I'd like to learn a lot more about you and you for each other. The fastest way I know to do this is a technique called pair introductions. Here's how it would work. In a moment, I would ask everybody to stand up and to look for someone across the room that you don't know well. I'd ask you to walk up and introduce yourself, and in about a minute, please say your level of Scrum experience, which products you develop or support during an average week, and 2 professional skills you do well at work. At the end of right about a minute, I'd like you to make sure the other person has started talking, because there are only 2 minutes for this. At the end of 2 minutes, I would ask you to politely disengage from the conversation, but promptly. I'll call out time. It's been 2 minutes. Please find someone else across the room again that you don't know well. In this way, in 4 minutes, you'll have met 2 people, and I and Christian and Paul will have listened as hard as we can to try to get a feel for who all's in the room. That's our job, to learn as much as we can. When that's done, we'll show the next step together. Would you be willing to give it a try? Trainers and coaches, you've done this before, please mingle. And folks, the trainers and coaches, Mary Michael helped facilitate all of the catering and the event setup Monday, Tuesday. I've asked her to take the class today. So please defer any catering comments, although she was helping so much Monday, Tuesday, to William Newing when you see him. Please invite Mary Michael. She's not new to Scrum, but she's getting recertified as a student. Folks, please, if you don't mind, get it up and mingle. Start a timer, all right?
How can I help you?
Well, we need a marker.
Oh, you already got one.
I got one.
I would just throw it up on the wall for somebody else.
I can get a marker.
Yeah, can we grab a marker? And we need a team name. And I'm Brian, by the way.
I'm Lee.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Who's creative here as far as naming?
Well, we used to do with Joe, every sprint we had a name.
Okay.
And it wasn't just sprint 291.3 or anything. It was
Okay.
something that was funny and happened during the week.
I'm all for that because when it comes to naming variables, I'm the test 1, test 2, test 3, test 4 guy. So let's not do that.
Well, one thing we have in common is pouring rain.
Did we lose somebody?
Oh, just there.
Right there.
Okay.
So team name, any ideas?
I have no preference.
I know. I just don't know where to start. But you?
You know, I think we can make some cool name out of the first letters of each of our names, but I don't know if that'll be easy to say.
BJL.
How about team well balanced?
Team well balanced.
There's only one vowel.
Well, I got 2 names. Yeah. Team Nobel.
Team
Oh,
no
no, wait.
balance.
What we can do is do BGLA. No, you have A. I've got C. And come up with some other acronym.
Okay, you want me to write?
So B for
Do that, or do we just want to go with, like,
bodacious.
Team super awesome.
super awesome, well balanced, something like that, right?
Team
Super awesome.
Super awesome. How about
Super
that?
awesome, low balance. Joe will like super awesome.
Perfect. Okay, leave a blank line. Doing done.
Exactly.
Yeah. Done.
choose a product owner and a Scrum Master. Do we have volunteers for either of those?
So I'm
wanna
a
be-
Scrum Master already at work, so I prefer not to. I'd probably rather do the product owner.
Gunnar wants to be Scrum Master.
Scrum Master.
And does anybody want to be a product owner?
Like I said, I'll volunteer for it unless
I
somebody
kind of
else
do that
wants
at work. I
it.
don't.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm on vacation.
You're Lee Kelly, right?
Yeah.
Kevin's Chris Wallace.
Oh,
So
you're
we spoke.
Chris.
Yes.
Okay, see,
We
no
spoke
wonder
on
we
the
made,
phone.
like, eye
Right.
contact. All right. Now I need to pick your brain today.
At some point today, I've already alerted William, since he also knows what's going on with the website. We'll have a
Yeah, that works great because I do this all day,
planning meeting.
so I'd really rather learn a different perspective, especially because this is who I deal with all day. So I'm like to understand where she's coming from. I mean, I already have a concept of her role, but I would just like to understand it a little bit more.
So then I guess the other point is to create a backlog. We've got sticky notes on our table and markers. Gunnar already has them. Already Scrum Mastering and removing blocks. And basically what you want to gain from the class.
Okay. So learning objective. Where do we grab the test? You say we already have them over there?
He's got
Oh, okay. I see. So we need 3 good learning objectives, right?
as many as you want. It's just an example. That's for each person. If you have, basically, if it is an individual, if you have any learning goals, or as a team, if we have any.
Would learning how to manage teams be one? Because I feel like if I could manage teams better, I'd be a better player.
I think that's a perfect. So, like for you, maybe you want to learn more about the product owner role, right?
Yeah, I'd like to understand how the priorities are determined from the product owner, right? So, I understand we go into prioritization, that's great, but, and I get where it comes from the customer base, but how are they determined? Do they have something they work off of, or is it just, their private method they're using?
Right.
Anybody can write.
Here, let's grab some more Post-its.
I would like to learn how to make teams self-organized. That's
Yeah, it seems a little bit empty. We can always edit this after. Yes,
You are.
or after each break.
sorry,
Oh, thank you.
thank you.
Do you have something?
Do you mind to write?
Yeah, sure.
I would like to learn how to make team self-organized.
No, I think you've been through these Scrum classes you teach them, right? How do you guys feel about using tools to support it?
What do you mean?
Like Target Process or Jira or something like that?
Okay, yeah. So on teams that I've been on, we definitely use some kind of a
Scrum-based
software-based
tool.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we use Trello right now for wiki speed.
Really? Oh, because Trello's free, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we used Trello for a while. Trello didn't have what we needed, so we had to go to a Target Process, which is a little bit more integrated, but yeah.
You can start thinking how do you like to prioritize?
The other thing is what John mentioned in one of his presentations. He measures his happiness. I don't know, that would be nice
Happiness
to-
metric.
Yeah, happiness metric. Yeah.
Happiness, 2S? Yeah.
Yes. JPINES.
I will admit, I am a total, if I'm typing, I just go for the red squiggly line corrected. I just don't have time for that, right? See, and I've worked on teams like this before where we've used nothing but a whiteboard and sticky notes, and while that's semi-efficient, you still got to manage everything through Excel.
It actually, yeah. So it seems to work well for a co-located team, but as soon
Yeah.
as you have a distributed team, this.
Right.
Excuse me.
Well,
I mean, you can take
visually-
a picture of it and send it off. But
Yeah, visually it's great, except for the problem is when you have to take these down and then manually log them into some tool so you can generate a Burndown chart, right?
Well, and see, that's one thing. I work remotely, so I haven't even met my boss face to face, like any of my team members or anything. So I basically work with my boss and a software developer, and then I work with state and county agencies and stuff like that who are completely non-technical. So that's kind of how I want. Like that's why I somehow somehow getting this to work, bringing in people, like, 'cause we did that when I worked with Joe at the foundation. We worked, with non-technical people every once in a while, but mostly it was everybody kind of knew what we were talking about.
There is a way to do this.
Yeah.
You can. It's just you have to be engaged every day in order for it to work, right? Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. So you can set a process around this. Depends on the size of the team.
Like, if you could still do just like the internal, but then have them come in for the sprints and stuff. We did that a lot too. Like, we would have somebody from another department that had a stake in whatever project we were working on at the time come in at like the end of the sprint plan instead of coming for daily standards and stuff like that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get the idea.
See, I
Don't know how well that worked really.
When I first started, I was in healthcare, so we had a mix of everybody was Kanban. Now, how do we bring Agile into this? And so they tried to bring it into manufacturing, but using the way it was taught in software. So it didn't work great, right? Their implementation on it wasn't too good as well. Now, being in a full software company, Agile fits perfect because that's how we run our day-to-day. But it's still mixed a little bit with Kanban, which is hard to get past when you have some kind of manufacturing element tied to it. Do they go over Kanban with you?
He would probably cover it.
It seems like it kind of it can fit into anything if you really try.
It can.
It works better in different areas, obviously.
See, the hard part is that as using Scrum, we've kind of derived it to work well for our business. So it follows most of the principles, but there's some things we threw out because to us it was wasted effort.
Right.
So we don't do them. Daily stand-ups, we don't have a daily stand-up. We have them every morning. What user story, what tasks you work on. Consider it a daily stand-up, but we still do it electronically. Here I am, here's my flow, we're done. So we know. We don't do a 3-week sprint cycle. We do 3 weeks.
For your daily stand-up, do you cover any blocks that you may have?
Yeah, so when we go through that, we check impediments, we see where we need help. Yeah, so we do the original, here's my user stories, but target process allows that relationship for linking. So if I have a problem, I can tag my coworker in there and say, here's our impediment, here's where the roadblock is. So it's all electronic.
Ad hoc.
Yeah, so we do this. The problem was we found with stand-ups, when you get people to stand up for 5 minutes, it often ventures away from work. And so you waste a lot of time standing there talking about somebody's commute or this or that.
Thank you so much. Does any team have someone as a product owner and someone as a Scrum Master? In Scrum, trainers and coaches don't give this away unless everybody gets stumped for a little while. In Scrum, who is the only person that can prioritize their product backlog when they own? Yes, the product owner. So each team has a product owner. That's your job. Now, if you're delivering a product or a service, to whose benefit are you prioritizing the backlog? To whose value are you trying to maximize? Gunnar.
To the client or customer?
Yeah, the customer, the client, the stakeholders, right? In this class, where our goal is to create from some new folks, newly minted certified Scrum Masters, who are our stakeholders?
The new students.
Yeah, the people in the class that are pursuing their certified Scrum Master credential. How easy is that, product owners? You don't have to get on a plane, you don't have to have a video chat or even make a phone call. You ask the people at your table, what's most important to us? Now, in the event of a tie, people don't always agree, right? That never happens. Who in Scrum is the only role who can break that tie of their stakeholders' interests to create a single prioritized list out of the backlog? Who's that? Scrum Master. It is the product owner. They're the only person who can prioritize their backlog or delete something. Now, closer to the point I just heard over here, who can add anything to anyone's product backlog at any time? Anyone. So if you have a stakeholder that has a burning wish, how long do you want to wait before that's in front of the team, or for the team to be able to know they have that burning wish? You don't want to wait at all. So in Scrum, they're specifically allowed to add any time. But where's the only place on the product backlog they can add something new? At the bottom of it.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, at the bottom. And the product owner then prioritizes to say, is that higher value than what we were doing? So product owners in this class, every break, I'd like you to ask your team, your stakeholders, what's the most important thing for us to cover next to become certified Scrum Masters? And if it's not on the course backlog, which I just moved back here, if it's not on the course backlog, lobby to have it put right at the top so I'm more likely to see it, right? If that's something you need. Now we have a role called a Scrum Master. A Scrum Master's role is to make work visible. In Lean, this would be visual management. If your team says, we've covered this topic, it's done enough for us to become certified Scrum Masters, whose job is to make sure it goes in the done column so that I know and don't go any deeper into that topic and can start working on the highest value one? That's the Scrum Master. Absolutely, that's the Scrum Master. So at the end of every break, team, your Scrum Master needs to ask the team, can I put any of these in done? And the team won't always agree. Who gets to break the tie if not everyone agrees if something is done enough for a 2-day class? Product owner will get to break the tie on doneness. Now everyone else, you're part of what's called the development team. So it's your job to learn this stuff as fast as you can so the Scrum Master can move it over to done as fast as you possibly can. So do that by putting interesting questions in your backlog and lobbying them to be at the top, asking questions every time you need to, and helping optimize your own learning. Cool? Now we have a Scrum team. Folks, please have a seat. Decided where their teams can be. Thank you. Product owners, our newly minted product owners, I would like to bar you at the front of the room. Now we played with this for the trainers and coaches on Monday. This is going to be a little bit more formal, but only a little bit. Product owners of the teams, can you join me up front? So I should expect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 product owners. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Down a product owner. Team, look at who's on your product owner list if you don't remember, and see who's missing. I'm missing a product owner.
One row.
Okay. Is your product owner up here? Yes. What's your team name?
Outrageous.
Yes, you are. This team, what's your team name? Don't have a team? Oh, so that's what's happened.
It's 5.
Does any team have more than 5 people? Okay. Now, is this team only 2 people right now?
Sure. Looks that way.
Looks that way?
And the sofa people, I'm not sure.
I'm going to ask 2 teams to vote someone off their island. I'm going to request that. Hey, Christian, are you on a team? Yep. Paul, are you on a team? You are now. Yep. Now, Holger, are you on a team? And Kuhn, are you on a team? Would you 2 paper, rock, scissors and decide which or both of you are on this team? I'm fine. Kuhn? Okay, and Paul, I'd ask you to actually come over. Otherwise, I'm not giving you a co-training credit. You got to actually work for this. Now that means you'll have to catch up and make a backlog on break, but I'd ask you to very quickly choose a product owner and set them up front. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, now remember, this is your product owner. Make it visible on your flip chart on the first break. Wonderful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Perfect. Here is a diagram of one of the 2 cars we're going to be making progress on today, and a little bit more tomorrow, I hope. And one of them we're going to sell. Maria Mattarelli, one of the founders of Agile Marketing, is going to tell us which of the cars we're going to sell. Because she's doing a lean startup marketing campaign to see which type of customers are actually more engaged right now, and we'll pick the car for them. Here are the modules, I believe, that are ready. 11 a.m. and the factory has another module to choose. So these will be called Factory 1, Factory 2. What we are doing right now is part of Scrum at Scale. It is called Meta Scrum. It's where product owners meet and they agree from one parent backlog, these red circles, one parent backlog of things to be done, who's going to do what so there aren't duplicates. They also know who to ask for status or support. I'll ask these product owners to choose from these red circled items, one of these items, and write it under their team name. Make sure that you don't have a duplicate. This is exactly how companies build fighter jets and brew petrochemicals. Folks, Meta Scrum has started. Product owners, please select and coordinate with each other. Yes.
I want the windshield.
I have no preference. To be determined. I'm okay with taking this question. Yeah, it's first come, first served. I'll give your here. Go with the left side.
I'll do factory 2.
suspension and keep it forward. Yeah, so factory one and right factory one and right suspension. We are left suspension.
Please label it on your sheet. Please quickly write that down so it becomes part of your sheet. Thank you.
You were not very clear, no?
What?
You were very clear about that.
For team size, we didn't have a choice. Right. Excellent. Thank you so much. Teams in Metascrum, what we just did. How do development team members influence what their team is going to do? Because it matters to them, right? They might have skills that are deeper in one area or exclusively in one area right now, or they might have strong preferences. How would they influence this decision so it isn't just done to them? How could you have done it just now? You lobby your product owner. The product owner is the only one that picks. It does not necessarily make it fair, but it does make it fast and clear, which is important. The teams lobby their product owner. That's exactly how that works. Now, I believe we'll have a chance for another Metascrum tomorrow, but this is a Scrum Master class. We'll focus more on what the Scrum Masters do than the product owners. As a follow-up to this, the next level would be a product owner course where we will spend much more time doing Metascrum. We'll do it many more times with many more different scenarios. Here is the backlog for this class. It is in your printed materials, and it is, pardon me, the horizontal rows are made into vertical columns on these sticky notes. So you can follow along, you know what's coming next. If you have volunteered as one of the trainers or coaches to teach one of these sections, you know about when you're going to go. And we've just finished the very first section, Introduction and Teams. So I'll take it from the doing column, and would someone be so kind as to tell me to the minute the current time? 9:48. If I go to 9:48 on this chart called a Burndown chart, I guessed we would complete together 60 points in sprint 1. Later, we will talk about how those point estimation was created. For now, let's please accept for the moment there's a thing called points, and I guessed we would get 60 done. Now, I didn't know. Every class is different, but I guessed. Introduction in Teams is worth 18 points. 60 minus 18 is 42, right? So I'll go on our points graph down to 42 points, and I'll make a dot, a node. And I'll write how many points are remaining. 42 at the time we asked, it was 9:48 a.m. And I'll make a trend line. And I'll write what happened. All right, Joe did intro. And then I'll put this sticky note right on the node so we can retrospect the end of the sprint. What happened? If we're having lunch together at 12:30, how are we trending towards a 12:30 lunch right now? Right now it looks awesome. In traditional project management, how early do we have a trend line of when we're going to ship? Again, coaches and trainers, please don't answer it unless the room is stuck. How early do we have a trend line to when we're actually going to ship in traditional project management?
Depends on how things are, you know, how you're spending and how you're accomplishing. So
It depends. There's some variables that impact it, and
I was gonna take a gander. I mean, we build a burn down and then you can't start measuring it until you complete the first task. There's nothing in there to look at until you have something to go off of.
traditional project management where we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So plan, analyze, build, test, deploy, or some flavor thereof is common, but it could be any set of phases. Have you ever been on a project that was 90% done for 2 years?
Sure.
Me too. It turns out Scrum is not that different than traditional project management. There are a few key differences. They're actually not that big. This is one of the key differences. In Scrum, we have a trend line to when we're actually going to ship from the moment we finish the first work item. According to Forbes, all of the top 10 IPOs, initial public offerings on the stock exchange, the companies that made the most money, the top 10, all of them use Scrum. Now that's not necessarily causal, we don't know. But we can definitely say there's correlation. All of the top 10 IPOs of all time use Scrum, according to Forbes, every single one. It's been true 5 years in a row now. I think this is one of the key reasons why we can make evidence-based decisions very, very early based on trend. Now it's not exact, we're gonna have standard deviation in this line, but we have a trend from the moment the first work item is complete. With that, let's start our second work item. And I have a guest lecturer to attempt to take this on. Folks, would you quietly but warmly cheer on Diane as she comes Now Diane was in this company while it happened, but Jeff Sutherland made these slides. She hasn't presented from them before. So I'll stand here to say what Jeff meant by these slides the best I know, but she'll tell the story. And it's a 5-point story. 2.5 minutes per point is our current run rate. So it's 2.5 times 5? 12? 15? Is it 15? 12.5? I'll make a timer visible to both of us so we can do our best. And we'll do our best. So it's set for 12.
Okay.
And let's try it together. I'm here as your resource.
Do I go the wrong direction?
Yeah, it's upside down apparently. Also a new clicker, right? I mean, whole thing's new.
Already lost a couple minutes there. Okay, so in 2005, around August of 2005, I happened to have the privilege of joining someone that I'd worked with in the past, Mr. Steve McNamara, in the company Medco. And Medco was probably one of the best companies I've ever worked in because the energy and the enthusiasm of everyone there. Our CEO decided to talk to the street. We had challenges with our how the street looked at us. We really were
Wall Street,
operated.
right?
Yes, I'm sorry. We were really operated like a benefit management company, doing defined benefit, defined contribution, health and welfare types of work. But the street compared us to other PBMs. So our struggle was to.
I don't know what a PDM is.
A PBM is a pharmacy benefit management company. There is one of the first things you have to do when you're a requirement person is never assume. And I just violated that.
What can you do? This is going, we're going well.
So the CEO, in an effort to really save the company, went to the street and said that we would completely redo our approach to our automated pharmacies by July in 2007, a year in the future. And the very intelligent people in our IT department were really struggling in how they were going to accomplish this. They had set up about 1,000 story points associated with this, and then realized that there were a lot of impediments to reach a date, and that right now they were looking at December of 2007 and about 11 impediments. Now, fortunately, we had a CIO who happened to have worked at a company called Toyota, and he was able in about a week to completely remove all of those impediments. That helped quite a bit. We were able to move it in some, but we were not really sure that we could deliver in all 3 pharmacies. In fact, one of the things that's really cool about Medco is we had the only truly automated pharmacies in the world at that time. And we wanted to improve those pharmacies. So what we did is instead of retrofitting all of our pharmacies, we worked with the CEO and actually looked to get one of them delivered with the best fulfillment system in the world. We were better at the end of this than Six Sigma in our pharmacies. And we had to be. We're delivering medication that if there is one thing wrong, it could result in somebody's death. And so we took that very, very seriously. So we delivered in July of 2007 for that one brand new pharmacy because it was easier to build something brand new than to retrofit everything. And you can see what happened to the stock market. Our Medco stock, it went up exponentially. And we continued on a good path until about 2011 when our street value is still not as high as other companies. And this company, which we thought was too big to fail, was sold and acquired by another company.
Yeah, for 29 billion. It's interesting how it's in the eyes of the beholder. She's like, and we failed. We were sold for 29 billion. That's great.
Well, I'll just keep my comments to myself. So when you look at these metrics, we literally had these types of screens all over the third floor of the main building where our board actually sat. Our boardroom was on the second floor. Everything was cleared out. We had white space. We had 100 teams at any given time working on this project. And these were some of the metrics. This is at the highest level, but every Scrum of Scrums had these same metrics that they worked from. And at that point, we were doing Scrum of Scrums. We didn't have some of the scaled mechanisms that are out. And so you can see very clearly anywhere you walked in on that floor where we were, what we needed to do differently. And we had basically all hands on deck to deliver this. And we were ultimately able to do that with that one particular pharmacy. So you can see kind of this is the example of the overarching program level, because we're talking multiple teams working on very different things, coming in and kind of what was the cost as well as how much do we have remaining in terms of work effort, our velocity trends, and you can see that sometimes things go up and down, and really the role of the Scrum Master there is to remove any impediments that are getting in the way of those teams so that we can get the velocity to be more consistent. And then the revenue per point associated with the actual work that we were doing, our goal was around 250, and you can see there were times when that was possible and times where we did not make it. Defects, we had really focused on no defects into production. And you can see here we had -6 in that particular, for whatever date and time this was delivered. And then the happiness metric is 3.2. When you have 100 teams at the same time in a company where you had people from probably 3 different consultant organizations came in and provided resources, so the ratio of employee to individuals who were external was somewhere between 1.5 to 10. So we had our own employees involved, but a lot of the development itself was being done in countries like India as well as in the US. All of that had to come together, and to be able to bring this in on a daily basis so our executives could see how everything was happening worldwide was one of the really significant things to be able to really track what we were doing. Nice. Thank you.
Joe, was for 5?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Dan, was the 1.5 to 10 ratio 1.5 employees to the contractor ratio?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
Awesome. If your business is doing Scrum, step 1, as big a step as this might feel, is attempting to create a huge billboard that looks like this, that everybody sees when they walk by. This way we know what's gotten done, what releases have recently happened. So this is our backlog, right? And here we have a bracket showing how many points is the organization getting done, cumulative together in a sprint. So we can see the organization is probably going to complete this in the next sprint. And we're about 4 sprints away from this release, which we guess is worth about 0.4 million in this case. We know the cost per team to run, or the cost cumulative of teams to run, and the cost trend to next release. This way, we can now engage the finance department of the organization. For this much money, we're going to make this much money. If we want this release faster, here are our impediments to remove. This dashboard is step 1 to an aggressive Scrum implementation. If you can create this in your organization, then we can start apply the patterns to accelerate Scrum. Without this, we're flying blind. It's like trying to increase the speed of a race car without having the speedometer or the lap time. Would someone kindly tell me the current time to the minute?
10.
Is it not 10:01, not 9:02?
10 on the dot. 10 on
Okay.
the dot.
And that was goal state, which is 5 points. 42 minus 5. Simple math is much harder in front of a class.
37.
37? Thank you. 37. 37 at 10. and we have Diane did Medco, or I'll call it the goal state. The goal state is having a dashboard that looks like that for all of the Scrum in your company. And if it's Scrum across the entire company, then it's for the entire company. We will attempt to take a break every 90 minutes at a maximum. Feel free to schedule phone calls then if that's what you need to do, or emails also, so you can pace your fluid intake. About every 90 minutes I'll have a break, so that should mean right about 10:30. And lunch is training to be 12:30. So if you need to schedule a phone call or a set of emails, I'd ask for electronics by exception only unless you're taking notes. And you can schedule your usage of electronics in that way. So where did Scrum come from? Jeff Sutherland was asked to give a TEDx talk. He's the co-creator of Scrum. I'll try to tell that story the best I can. He was asked to give a TEDx talk in Brussels. And a French design firm was hired to animate what happens to a company when Scrum is applied. These sugar cubes are the French design firm's representation of companies. That's not what I meant to do at all. Hold please, your call is very important to us. And here's Scrum. They called it hacking leadership, and they showed a graphic of it blowing up the organization. Why would we possibly want to blow up the company? Well, what if we could get 10 times as much done? What if we could work 5 times less and make twice as much? What if your product or service were 10 times better? What if poor people could buy everything for 10% of the current cost? What if we could have more fun and more joy at work? What if you could grow as a person to make a major contribution to the world? What if you could change yourself, your company, and the planet into something 10 times better? What if everyone had all they needed and more all the time, and we lived a life of abundance? Maybe it's worth blowing up the company if we could achieve this. This is the Global Poverty Index. I'm not going to say Scrum solved global poverty, although Scrum was involved through Muhammad Yunus's work eradicating poverty in sub-Saharan Africa using Scrum. He's won the Nobel Prize for this. But I won't say Scrum did this whole story. But what I want to point out is massive changes at a global scale are possible. The Global Poverty Index is trending to 0. The World Bank called Scrum Inc. last year and said, well, now what do we do? We're almost out of a job. What do we do in a post-scarcity society as the World Bank? And they're putting all the World Bank managers through Scrum training to inspect and adapt to make the world a better place. And I think by the end of this class, you might see why that could line up, why that might be an interesting angle. So large changes are possible, even on a global scale. In this country, that was the end of your time box, Diane, so you did great. In this country, we have a document saying we would like to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Well, what gets in our way? 9 times out of 10, despite our best intentions, despite our best laid plan, 9 times out of 10, the project is late or over budget. In fact, almost a third of the time, hardware or software, the project is so late, none of it is ever used. It's all scrapped a third of the time across all industry. Well, that certainly gets in the way of life, liberty, and the pursuit of, well, anything happy. If you feel this thing you're pouring your life into at work has a 90% chance of being late or over budget, and a third chance of being never used. 67% of us are actively looking for another job right now. Almost a third of us at work are engaged. Half of us at work are not engaged, and between 17.5% and 18.8% of us are actively disengaged, trying to tear apart the company from the inside right now, across all industries. maybe it's worth blowing up the company to try something else. The current state is so atrocious. Here's why people hate work, according to the New York Times. The number one reason: they don't have regular time for creative or strategic thinking. They're always late. Interesting how that lines up with the trend of 90% of projects are later over budget. Second, they don't have ability to focus on one thing at a time. They're being forced to multitask. Right behind that, they don't have the opportunity to do the part of work which is most engaged. They don't get to prioritize. They always feel it's been commanded. Next, they don't feel a level of meaning or significance, and this is tied to the next one. They don't feel connection to their company's mission. Well, my company has a beautiful mission, but the little piece I'm doing doesn't seem to have anything to do with that, and 9 times out of 10 I'm told I'm late, and a third of the time it's thrown out anyway. Despite the best laid plans, often we're forced with nothing but misery. And this has been true since the invention of the idea of waterfall project management. This is not a recent poem. Jeff Sutherland says he also knows something about pain and suffering. As a West Point cadet, here's a picture of him where he's standing in what's called the shower formation. And he says he was forced to stand rigorously at attention until his bathrobe was drenched in sweat, and then he would be allowed to shower. As a penalty assignment, Jeff was assigned to be marching commander of Company L2. This is what West Point does to teach humility. Here's how it works. They intentionally take the worst marching performers of all the cadets at West Point, and they take one of the more senior cadets who's trending to graduate soon as an officer, and they make them the marching commander of this group. And it's their job to improve this group's marching skill. Well, Company L2, the Loose Deuce, had been the worst marching group in all of West Point for 202 years continuously. Never broken. They're intentionally composed of the worst marchers. That makes sense. So Jeff already did something very different. He hasn't invented Scrum yet at this point in our story, but you can see where it's coming from. And this part is part of Scrum that he came up with as a cadet at West Point. He said, well, what's been tried before? Had they been forced to march overtime? Yes. Troops had been forced to march nights and weekends, and it hadn't improved them from last place. Had they been verbally berated in front of their peers? Yes. And at this point in time, you could still beat them. And that had been done too. And even that didn't work. Well, what hadn't been tried? We don't have a picture of the actual bulletin board anymore, but Jeff took a cork board and he hung it outside the barracks, not inside, the outside of the barracks, right by the door, where everyone in Company L2 would see it as they walk in the door, and everyone that they felt accountable to would see it as they walked by the barracks. Every 2 weeks, all the marching commanders would watch the cadets as they parade across the parade route, and they would deduct points. Things like -3 points, Charlie Saber is dragging in the parade route. -2 points, the second line back is marching out of sync. Jeff would write on an index card each of these point deductions and put it on the corkboard. The cadets were furious. You can't criticize a West Point cadet publicly. Well, you could berate them publicly, but this type of criticism was absolutely no precedent. They took the corkboard down, Jeff found it in the bushes, hung it back up. In 2 weeks, the West Point Company L2 had improved. Now the critiques, the point deductions, were all about management. The commands are not articulated clearly enough. The commands are not articulated at the correct timing. Jeff wrote those down and put them on the corkboard. People were even more angry. You can't criticize West Point leadership. The corkboard was taken down, Jeff found it, hung it back up. In 4 weeks, Company L2 went from the bottom ranked group in all of West Point for 202 years continuously to the top. Number 1. I'll come back in a moment. General MacArthur passed away during this time. He was a West Point graduate, and he had specified that when he's interred by an honor guard in Arlington Cemetery, his honor guard would be the top-ranked cadets at all of West Point. West Point begrudgingly had to give that honor to Company L2. That was Jeff's company. There they are. There's Jeff's company marching as the honor guard to inter General Douglas MacArthur. I've had a chance to speak to several of the cadets in that corps at this point, and they all say it transformed their entire outlook on life. They would made it into a prestigious officers training school, but they were at the bottom of it, Company L2. And suddenly they were transcendent, and they felt they had control over their own careers in a profound way by making work visible. This part is now part of Scrum. Make work visible inspires the team. If we have a great big visible dashboard like Medco has, but you have to navigate to it somewhere on the internet, we don't get this effect. If a Scrum team has a great big visible backlog, a great big visible performance dashboard that is visible not only to the team, but the people the team feels accountable to, it's outside their work area, broadcasting out, the team is encouraged to transcend in a positive way, without them being berated, without them being beat up, without overtime. This is core to Scrum. This is a mandatory part of Scrum. This leads us to the first mega issue, we call it, in Scrum Inc. When we're brought into a company that does not yet have Scrum, or a company that's been doing Scrum for years, but they haven't yet doubled revenue, and they say, something's wrong, help us. They have a lack of prioritization. Bad symptoms are, we hear things at Scrum Inc. in the company like we have multiple conflicting priorities, or our teams are constantly disrupted by changes for new projects, and everything is #1 priority. Related, we all work on 5 projects at once. Now this is solvable. Which of the 3 Scrum roles is responsible for priority for their team? Product owners solve this by prioritizing just one item at the top for the team to swarm on. We know it's fixed when every team has a clear ordered backlog every sprint, so they know exactly what they need to do and in what order. Related, teams are stable. No teams are rated for people to start new projects, and backlog flows to stable teams. Another general helps shape what has become Scrum. Does anyone recognize who this general is? It's Eisenhower. So Eisenhower has given us stuff like the Eisenhower matrix. Urgent, but not important. Important and urgent, etc. Eisenhower is famous for many things, including saying, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Eisenhower, according to the letters and notes that have now been released, oversaw all of the planning for the invasion of Normandy at D-Day. This is still the most expensive and complex operation ever undertaken by humans. Eisenhower and the letters and then the minutes we have state, all those involved in the ground operations and air operations and naval operations are present, and they're all taught to memorize the plan and know that from the moment the first shot is fired, the plan will be shattered, and they will have to act independently to achieve commander's intent. So the goal is for them to all memorize the plan in order to work independently, completely apart from the plan. The Nazi forces flooded not only the irrigation ditches and the farmland on the beachhead, but also the farmland itself. So there are millions of acres of mudflats now. And from their planning records, from their planning letters, we see, plan was, the invading Allied troops will be stymied at the beachhead. They'll be walking through such tall mud, they'll be easy to pick off from the machine gun emplacements, and they'll never even make it past the beachhead, because they'll be surprised by all of the mud that's there instead of traversable fields. Well, it's true. The US Army and all of the Allied forces had no idea. From their letters, we see that my great uncle, Carroll Dunn, then the head of the Army Corps of Naval Engineers, oversaw the construction of the world's largest continually folding bridge system on the landing craft while they were landing with found materials without slowing down the landing. So as they land, the bridge continuously unfolds, and the armored vehicles and the troops rush at full speed and aren't slowed down by the mud at all. And it's the Nazis' encampments that are caught off guard. Secondly, we have from captured letters, the Nazi remote command posts knew the United States was sending paratroopers in to be dropped behind Nazi lines. However, their letters say they will be completely ineffectual. They will have no way to contact back to headquarters and be an integrated part of a plan. It's true, the paratroopers were completely cut off and had to self-organize based on what they saw. From their letters, we see they saw the telegraph lines connecting the Nazi command posts, and they crawled on their bellies to cut the telegraph lines. That's what they were able to self-organize to do, despite that was never part of their plan. It turned out to be the Nazi remote command posts that were completely ineffectual because they were cut off from central command and were reliant on approval from above and were not allowed to act independently until they had already been overrun. This is now absolutely part of Scrum. Plans are worthless. Planning is everything. Scrum teams replan every single sprint instead of one large planning cycle up front. And yet the plan is perfectly changeable because the plan itself is worthless. Here's an example of a bad plan. This is Captain Edwin Attenbury. He flew in a squadron with Jeff Sutherland over North Vietnam. They're flying F-4 jets. Here's Edwin bailing out right here, and you can see his parachute just starting to open. His aircraft has been shot down by a surface-to-air missile. He was following his flight plan. His flight plan says fly low and level to the target, take the photograph or release the ordnance, and fly low and level back to protected airspace. Jeff later became a PhD in medical statistics, but he already had a statistical interest after graduating as a cadet and now transferring to the US Air Force as a fighter pilot. He became a Top Gun fighter pilot, best in his squadron, and he was asked to train the other Top Guns. He became a Top Gun instructor. Here's what he taught them. He said, half of our missions end in a fatality. Half. You have a 50% survival rate. He said, I've flown over 140 missions and I've come back. Here's what I do. He said, one, I ignore my flight plan. From the moment our plane exits protected airspace, my jet is already in an evasive maneuver. One of those evasive maneuvers will take my jet low and level over the target to take the photo or release ordnance for a moment. I will immediately resume evasive maneuvers until I'm over protected airspace. The pilots Jeff trained had an 80% survival rating, 30% improved. After the war, the US Air Force said, son, you've paid your debt to your country. What do you want to do next? Jeff said, I'm sick of war. I want to teach at the medical school. They sent him to Stanford and then to the Colorado University of Medicine to get his PhD in medical statistics, and he taught medical statistics at the medical school. His thesis advisor while there was Dr. John Baylor. Dr. John Baylor had just conducted a statistical review of the mammography practices of the time, and he found them to be causing more deaths than they were preventing. There was an enormous amount of money against Dr. John Baylor, primarily from the mammography machine companies of the time. Luckily, the medical community did exactly the right thing. They immediately convened what's called a blue ribbon panel that met for 6 months to validate or to vet all of Dr. Baylor's research and compare it against any other data they had access to. They determined Dr. Baylor to be absolutely correct. The practices were changed, and now statistically, tens of millions of women's lives have been saved. And not just women. I'm not sure how many of you know breast cancer can affect both genders. Here, Jeff Sutherland went to Dr. Baylor and said, you're my thesis advisor. When most thesis statements are written, they're put in a binder on a shelf somewhere to gather dust. When you write a document, it changes the way the world practices medicine, and it saves lives. What should I write my thesis on? Dr. Baylor said, as now chair of the International Cancer Research Society, I have access to all the data on how cancer cells spread in the human body. The problem is none of the data agrees. If you can figure out why it doesn't agree, you'll get your doctorate, you'll get your PhD. Jeff said this might not be possible, no one has ever solved it before, but I'll take it. What Jeff did is he wrote a computer algorithm that would compare all of the data on how cancer cells spread in the human body. It would do a statistical comparison and see statistically are there similarities in the way that cancer cells move through the human body. He ran it once, and it consumed half of the IT budget for the Colorado University of Medicine and the U.S. Air Force branch there for the year. He was told, you're never allowed to run your program again. But he had to run it multiple times to achieve statistical significance. At this time, Pascal Company published Pascal's algorithm. This was an early time slice sharing algorithm. What they said is if anyone rewrites their research project in our format using Pascal's algorithm, it will run during unused time cycles at any university supercomputer in the system. So Jeff rewrote his thesis project in Pascal's algorithm, and the following year it was run enough times for statistical significance, and it was validated. Here's what he came up with. If a cancer cell is in what is then named state 46, there's only 4 things that cell can do. It can either mutate left towards state 47, it can mutate right and become diploid acute leukemia, it can stay where it is, or it can revert one state. This is why none of the data seemed to agree. It was a state system, and the statistical analysis made that clear. If we move to state 47, we can either mutate to state 48, meaning where the cell is non-viable, it's antigenetic, it can't reproduce, and it dies off. The cancer just dies off. Or it can become an early solid tumor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is called state theory. It's currently thought of to be the way all cells work, and this is part of Scrum. A Scrum team's job, I should say, I've had a chance to work in 4 cancer drug research companies since then, and I asked, what model are you using for how the cancer cells spread the human body? It was all this model, all the Sutherland model. Jeff's thesis has been in the field in every cancer drug company I've been in so far. So already we're building the story that this person is a polymath. He's a Top Gun fighter pilot, a Top Gun instructor, and now his thesis is what is currently used to model how cancer cells spread in a human body. This was later validated by DNA sampling to trace the exact cell. In state theory, a Scrum team attempts to identify what state it's in towards hyperproductivity, the goal of Scrum, getting far more work done in a given time than they did before. If a Scrum team determines what state it's in, it's then their job to mutate their team towards hyperproductivity. And you have choices, and some branches are dead ends. So sometimes the team has to go back to a way they used to work in order to accelerate again. There are only 5 meetings in Scrum. During one of these meetings, the team attempts to identify where it is in state theory and make one change, one mutation of the team towards hyperproductivity. Do any of the new people in the room know or have a guess which of the 5 meetings of Scrum this happens?
The retrospective?
The retrospective. That is the only purpose of the retrospective. It comes from state theory. Its job is for the team to mutate itself towards hyperproductivity. Now to do that, they have to try to guess in which state they are currently towards hyperproductivity. And now we have our retrospective. But we haven't invented all of Scrum yet, right? Jeff now also has some experience with what is called massively parallel concurrent computing, or massively parallel concurrent production, using Pascal's algorithm. He's then hired by one of the world's largest banks. They say, we're creating the world's first ATM networks, automated teller machine networks. And we have a bunch of COBOL developers that are doing it. Now we know, Dr. Sutherland, that you're a professor at the medical school and you've never run a large software project before, but you're one of the only people that has used Pascal's algorithm, and that's what we're using to network these ATMs. Jeff says, well, okay, how do you want me to run the project? Can I see the project plan? And they show him a Gantt chart of the delivery. And he says, well, I'm a medical school professor, so what do I know? But this plan is guaranteed to be late. And they said, how do you know? And he said, when humans estimate a project time, you have a cone of uncertainty. Statistically, our estimates are 400% low to 25% high. So that means the vast majority of the time we're underestimating. Well, all of these steps are dependent on the next steps in this Gantt chart you showed me. So if any one of these steps is late, the entire project slides to the right, and it's late. He said, I bet the developers working on this feel under pressure and unhappy. Can I meet them? We don't have a picture of the actual development team, but he says they look just like this. They were working nights and weekends. The customer was angry, the management was unhappy, and the teams were frustrated and depressed. Jeff said, I'm brand new to this company, and I'm coming to you from academia, but I would like to own this group. And in exchange for taking full responsibility to the board, I would like permission to run them like a separate company, not beholden to any of the policies of the bank. The company said, Sutherland, this is the top profit loss group in the whole bank. If you want that headache, you've got it. And he was made CIO, right from medical school. And he said, teams, the first thing we need to learn to do is how to land the project. I'm going to model this off how we train a new pilot to land a jet. Almost every time a new pilot tries to land a plane, he says, they land after the runway ends and break off the landing gear, and sometimes it's a burning fireball. He said, the goal is to land right at the beginning of the runway, but the new pilots are following the flight plan and not compensating for updrafts and wind shear, and they land after the runway. But that's a perfect landing. Jeff said, here's how they do it. They don't follow the blue line, which would be their flight plan. There are updrafts, there are changes in scenario. The pilot is constantly making adjustments. It's not flap to this position and coast. Then you crash. He says you're constantly making adjustments. And you have this red line, the burndown chart. Now the burndown chart is never drawn ahead of the actual delivery. And this is the method to land a plane right at the beginning of the runway. He said, I'm going to have to teach this to everyone delivering in this new method. And the second meeting in Scrum was created. So there's 5 meetings total. At this point, we have 2. We have the retrospective and this one. This meeting is where the team stands in front of the sprint burn down and says, what are we going to do differently today than we did yesterday to land this project right on time? Does anyone know or have a guess the name of this meeting? It's the Daily Scrum. It's the Daily Scrum. It's also called the Daily Stand-Up Meeting. It's also called the Daily Meeting. All names for the same meeting. Capped at a maximum of 15 minutes. And its job is not to ask, what did you do yesterday to help the team meet the sprint goal? What are you going to do today to help the team meet the sprint goal? What's blocking you? The goal is to, and as certified Scrum Masters, this is our one job, as coaches and trainers, this is our one job in this meeting, to look at the current burn down trend and say, what are we going to do differently today than we did yesterday to land right on time? This is why in Scrum, there's a list of work the team has for the sprint. It's called the sprint backlog. The team can change the sprint backlog. This is why. They're burning down the sprint backlog, and the team is actually going to change it to achieve commander's intent. This brings us to the second challenge or opportunity in Scrum. The second mega issue, continuous delivery. Bad symptoms are we don't know our velocity. And that's been on some of the Scrum teams some of you have been on. We didn't know. That's a problem. So how do we resolve that? Second, we know our velocity, but it's not improving. It's flatlined. Third, we're calling stuff done, but the product isn't tested. So it's not actually done. We can't integrate the work of multiple teams in one sprint. That takes even longer. Here's how we know it's been fixed. There are incremental, fully integrated builds of our hardware or our software or our business plan, and they can be done multiple times per day. Automated acceptance tests are run every time we build, every time we put our plans together, we put our software together, we put our hardware together. Teams have a potentially shippable increment of product at the end of a sprint or more often. Scrum's job is to put something in front of the customer or a proxy for the customer if we can't get a hold of them every sprint. This only works if the product or service or business plan we're making works at the end of the sprint. This is a mega issue. As a coach, I'm very often brought into companies who've been doing Scrum for years, but they haven't doubled revenue yet. And they ask why. And I say, can I see the current version of the thing you're building? and none of it works. They're in their planning phase or their analyze phase, and nothing works. Well, there's our opportunity. We need to split it into smaller prioritized pieces and get them done at the end of the sprint. Folks, this takes us to our first break, and at the end of break, we're going to build something. We have at least most of us. At least most of us. Hopefully we have at least half of every team. Let's try this. Here's an opportunity to get hands-on, and I'd like us to go to production. Here's the game I would like us to attempt. Goal: see how good your team can get at producing a modular car in 9 minutes. Yay! This should be hilariously fun, and we might even produce a modular car. Each bolt must be tight enough to not rattle, but not too tight to easily remove with a wrench, a hand tool. That's the definition of done I'm imposing for this exercise. The product owner listens and anticipate your team's questions. Get questions answered from the customer before the team is blocked. So product owner, you're more than welcome to help your team, but your primary job is to think, what is my team going to do next, not what they're doing now, and try to answer the questions that they might have before they even get to it. So your team's never waiting for a question. That's your job, product owner, to get that from the business or the stakeholder. I will play one customer, Maria Mattarelli will play one customer, and William Newing will play one customer. We might not always agree, but all of our answers are valid. Happens, right? Product owners, there you go. There are your opportunities. Scrum Masters, you can help build cars too, but your primary job is coordinating, sharing tools and parts across teams. We don't have one of every tool for every set of hands. We don't even have one of some tools for every team. Some teams will need to use the same tool at the same time. Scrum Masters will coordinate that so it's hopefully invisible to your team. You'll have an answer for your team like, wrenches of that size will be available to us at the cusp of the next sprint. I've negotiated that already, or whatever it is, right? That's their job. So product owners, you can build, but only if you already have what you think your team's next questions are going to be answered. Scrum Masters, you can build, but only if you've already coordinated tools and other dependencies across teams. For example, some of the parts of the car are in the same area, so not everyone can work in that area at once. Anyone can try to broker, hey, let's do this one first, then you. Scrum Masters are going to have the final say on that, right? Because they're the coordination point. Teams, questions on what the roles are primarily going to be responsible for during this exercise. Okay. Rule 1, product owner tests. There's our smiling product owner steering the wheel left and right. The car must roll forward, backward, and steer on its own wheels. From inside the car, the product owner must be able to steer the car left and right. Okay, product owners, you're going to try to pull backlog such that this can happen across all 6 teams working, right? That's our wish. Rule 2, teams are responsible for self-organizing and deciding among themselves how to manage the work, assign roles, etc. Teams are not in competition with each other, only with themselves. We're going to see if all together we can make this car come true, right? Product owners, you have an additional responsibility. It is in your printed materials. So you may want to flip your page to this sheet. Your job is, in sprint 1, new bolts tested for tightness. Would anyone remember to shout out the test for tightness?
Hand tool.
Yeah, hand tight, not wobbling, but not so tight they can't be undone with the hand tool, right? Because we're going to have to take some of this apart again later. Hand tight, but not wobbling. So, product owner, how many bolts that your team put in have you verified new this sprint meet that criteria? None? 2? 10? You might run out of bolts that your team can put in, so that's fine. This number could flatline if you get them all done early. Second, number of bolts the product owner has accepted with customer acceptance. So that bolt might be in, and it might not be wobbling, but the customer might say, yeah, but that's not where I want that thing. So that's not accepted. So there's number tightened, and then number that are tightened and meet the customer's acceptance. Then you're going to do a little math at the end of each sprint. You'll have a few minutes to do it. Tested divided by accepted. That's your quality. That's your running quality rate. Cool, product owners? Finally, acceleration in number B, the accepted stuff, from sprint to sprint. Are you getting even more bolts done that are accepted than the sprint before? Are you getting better at asking client questions? Is your team anticipating what this customer really wants through the questions you're answering, etc.? Product owners. Are there any questions from the product owners? All right. Folks, there will be 1 minute of planning and then 2 minutes of inspecting and adapting, looking at the tools. You can ask William, myself, or Maria Moretta questions. But no joke, what we're going to do is walk downstairs to a shop that's fully alien to about half of you and pretty new to all of us. Well, almost all of us. And we're going to suddenly see stuff, and there'll be a wall of sticky notes that William has prepared for us. And we'll have 3 minutes to make a plan with our team what we're going to do. That is actually what's going to happen. I've had a chance to do this all over the world. It's typically very fun. Product owners are going to pull one card from the top and put it in the doing column. Only one card at a time goes in doing. And say, team, what's our plan to get this done? Are we going to do this in pairs? How are we going to coordinate with other teams? When 3 minutes ends, we start. And there's 3 minutes of build. Just 3 minutes. It's tightly timed. And you record how much you got done. We'll do this 3 times. So you'll have 3 chances to accelerate. In 9 minutes, we'll see where we are. I'll say the current record is this. It took them 28 minutes. We're going to do 9 minutes now, and then we'll have an opportunity to do as much more as people like today during happy hour and after happy hour in the evening today to finish. But we'll see how far we can get in 9 minutes. You can see how far they got in 9 minutes. Actually, that graph is from their sprint. But you can calculate how far they got in 9 minutes, and ultimately it took them 28 to pass the test where they could steer it from inside and it rolled on its own wheels front and back. Now you know what you're up against. That's the best it's ever happened. Questions from the product owners? There's a product owner
So
question.
are we supposed to be working on those modules that we had chosen earlier?
That's what I'm wondering.
Yes, I would encourage you to coordinate among them. Now that said, what happens when one of your modules is on? I don't know if anyone will get all the way done in 9 minutes, but maybe everyone will. What happens when it's on, right?
Okay.
What happens when it's on?
Then we negotiate with other teams to see what happens.
You'll be running Meta Scrum at the end of every sprint. But yes, you've run your first Meta Scrum already, so you can say, William Newing, is their product backlog ready for this module? And you'll grab that first, right?
So we're on suspension.
And then there was a question here I think I saw next.
Left, I'll just
or is it the same question?
It's, yeah, he answered the same question. So
Product
I'm
owner
just
question?
curious, as a product owner, how do you select what to work on? I don't know anything about the product.
For this exercise or in general? Yeah, right. Your team will often inform you. Your team, now not always, but your team will often say, I really think we need to do X before Y because I'm not sure if there's a dependency, but we'll at least learn a lot that's going to help Y. So let's do X, they'll tell us. Or all our skill is on A. Now we're going to need to learn B before this thing is done. But let's start with A and learn something about the project at all in an area we're comfy. So usually your team tells you if you as a product owner don't already have a very clear vision of it, usually. Yeah, that's my coach's answer. Other coaches here are probably going to give you more good input. That's mine. Okay. I was product owner. Scrum Masters, do you have any questions about what we're going to attempt to try? Yes?
What do we do if our Scrum Master is?
You just showed up.
Oh, you shut up. Yay!
Oh,
Scrum Master.
valid question. In a team, if your product owner or your Scrum Master is somehow not there, what do you do? Because Scrum relies on those roles all the time in real time to do specific things. What do you do? Battlefield promotions. Someone is always product owner and Scrum Master. And in a team that's been together for a few sprints, they typically have a known handoff change. And it evolves, right? But typically people know, if so-and-so's not in the room, I'll play that role and I'll do my best, right? Battlefield promotions, there's always a Scrum Master. There's always a product owner, yeah? Okay. Other Scrum Master questions? Development team questions.